Welcome, Team Rhino. We are celebrating World Rhino Day today by talking with experts from around the world on subjects on a variety of rhino conservation topics. Joining me is Bibhab Talukdar, Chair of the Asian Rhino Specialist Group and the International Rhino Foundation's Asian Rhino Program Coordinator. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Chris.
Last time we chatted was for Cinco de Rhino, and COVID-19 was just beginning to impact India. Can you bring us up to date? What's the current situation there?
In last 1 month, the overall situation has deteriorated further. A number of people affected across India has been going up. We have almost 75,000 people, casualties. They died because of COVID. Assam also, the number of death cases are increasing. It's almost going 300 plus now. But fortunately, the rhino bearing areas, the protectors, the conservationists so far are doing okay despite the challenges. And we do hope that, people who are playing an important role in the conservation of rhinos, let Almighty give them strength to fight against COVID and put their whole energy for conservation.
Our thoughts are definitely with you there, and we're sorry to hear that you have another spike going on in India, and definitely send our well wishes to those that are keeping the rhinos safe from everybody here at the International Rhino Foundation.
Thank you.
It was also monsoon season, and there was some flooding in the areas, as there is normally every year. Can you tell us about the recent flood?
Well, the flood hit the rhino-bearing areas, mainly the Kaziranga National Park, which is having about 2,400 rhinos, and then another small wildlife sanctuaries, called Povitora Wildlife Sanctuary, which are having 102 rhinos. Povitora Wildlife Sanctuaries are having the highest density of rhinos. So these are the two rhino-bearing areas out of the existing four are actually affected by the high flood. High flood hit these rhino-bearing areas almost 3 or 4 times in the month of July. Fortunately, in the month of August, or even in the first, we are in the first part of September, there is no flood havoc in these rhino-bearing areas. So in the month of July in Kaziranga National Park, 13 July, the flood level was the highest. And the 13 July 2020 flood level was in fact the 6th highest flood level in Kaziranga National Park in the last 40 years. So
wow,
we had, So we had some casualties of rhinos. Initially it was 11, but then it increased to 18 because, once water receded, more and more carcasses were detected.
And how do wildlife typically respond to the flooding?
Well, generally, when the water level increases normally, because of the monsoon water, the animals have that instinct, and they slowly move to the higher, grounds within the national park and also outside the national park. So, this is a natural phenomenon, and almost all the wildlife living there, are aware of the monsoon flood, and they prepare themselves. They accumulate extra fats so that if during that hard time they can survive. And this is a natural process, especially in the floodplain ecosystems. And if we see the Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest, this is the only natural process that can ensure the fittest animals survive, and some weaker animals go away as part of the natural selection. But nowadays, the flood has become unpredictable because it is not the monsoon flood. It is also how much, water, the volume of water released by dams in the upstream. So that makes the things more complicated.
So those dams can, when they release water, they can actually increase the flooding or speed up the flooding. Is that correct?
Yes, because the volume of water, especially when dam releases, it's much more than probably the animals can anticipate.
And it doesn't give them as much time to react as they
Right.
would naturally. We often look at flooding as being bad, but it's actually, you mentioned it, a very important part of the ecosystem. What does flooding do for that floodplain ecosystem?
Well, it energizes the wetland and grassland ecosystems. It also takes away, some of the weeds like water hyacinth. Only in high flood, the water hyacinth from the national park can go to the river Brahmaputra and then it flushed away. So that's why these are few examples that the animals or the habitats are enriched because of this natural flood. Of course, we feel bad even if a single animal dies, but these are the natural phenomenon. We definitely need to look at if we can minimize the loss because of this annual flood. But at the same time, we should not probably do too much to stop the natural process functioning, because this is the natural process that has helped the rhinos survive when its population was thought to be about 12 at the beginning of the 1905. From 12 it has increased to 2,400 plus. So definitely flood comes every year almost. So flood is definitely not a major issue threatening the rhinos. There are issues, but we should also definitely need to look at if we could minimize the casualties, not only of the rhinos, but for other animals too.
So you mentioned it, that yeah, the rhinos and the wildlife, they've spent hundreds of years, thousands of years living in this ecosystem. So yeah, they are used to and expect the flooding that occurs. Now, they naturally will relocate to higher ground, and there is high ground in Kaziranga, but they also move outside of Kaziranga. You mentioned that as well. Does that create an issue in any way when they move out of the national park?
Yeah, the natural highlands that animal could see from distant places is the Karbi Anglong Hills. And it is quite visible for probably each and every animal, to look at towards the south of Kaziranga National Park. But then not all animals comes out from the national park. It is not that 2,400 rhinos leave the national park and all comes to the hilly areas. Some of them, yes, including the other animals. But as the development has grown, the human population has grown. In certain areas, those corridors are disturbed. Certain areas, the gap has increased, the connectivity has reduced, or because of developmental purpose, the habitat connectivity are reduced. So animals are getting more and more challenges. Third is the increased number of vehicles. We all know how our world is growing. In my city alone, every month in Kamrup district, which is the main district in Assam, the capital district, 10,000 vehicles get registered. So the number of vehicles passing through this highway, that actually have on the other side you have Kaziranga, on the other side you have Karbi Anglong. So those are the challenges. But good thing is that the government has realized those challenges, and during high flood, even this time as well, on 13th of July, when high flood hit Kaziranga National Park, the district authority has stopped the movement of vehicles through Kaziranga National Park. They diverted the movements unless it is an urgent or emergency. So I think government is definitely looking at the issues, and people are also quite passionate about conservation. So a combination of government's leadership and people's cooperations are helping animals to survive despite the challenges during the flood time, or even in other times as well.
And the government is also looking at other particular programs. In fact, they've proposed building artificial highlands in the park. Can you tell us a little bit about this program?
Yeah, see, in earlier also during 1990s, few highlands were constructed in Kaziranga National Park. That was because in 1988, that was still the highest flood in Kaziranga's history, 1988. So, few highlands were constructed. 2018-19 also, a few more highlands have been constructed, and there are now, considerations in the government to construct more artificial highlands inside the national park. Well, some highlands are essential, but we also need to look at, the flood generally creates havoc or threatens animals, maybe up to 7 to 10 days in a year during high flood. But the natural process, like the floodplain ecosystems, the moist grasslands, those will probably more evolve in the wetland areas. So that ecosystem balance we should not disturb. So highlands, I won't say that highlands are not needed. Highlands are maybe needed, but where we need to have highlands, I think that needs proper scientific, studies, depending on the inflow and outflow of the water, the hydrology, the habitat, the possibility of siltations from these highlands, and then in the appropriate size based on the science, highlands may be constructed. Highlands should not be constructed rapidly without studying, the hydrology or inflow and outflow of water.
So even adding a highland, which, as you said, could provide, a safety for wildlife, could have a huge impact on this ecosystem.
Definitely, definitely. We should not give an impression that, highlands are the solutions. The solutions is to maintain the floodplain ecosystem. How we can reduce the impact of flood? We may probably may have to construct few more highlands depending on where are the gap areas and where the water flow is not going to break those highlands, and that can ultimately result into siltations. So I think this needs proper studies, and based on the proper studies, the highlands, how many, where it needs to be constructed has to be decided.
So where is this this issue right now, and what actions do you recommend?
Well, I also mentioned to our government agencies that let there be discussions, and nowadays the digital elevation model maps from the satellite imageries can really help us. And the Kaziranga National Parks are meant almost like every 2 or 3 kilometers, because we have a lot of anti-poaching forest camps. So those camp people can also give valuable informations as part of the ground truthing, which are the areas are actually inundated, how much it is inundated, and generally monsoon, 1 feet inundations, I won't say it is flood, because everywhere. But the depth is very essential, when we will really call it flood, because wetlands, in the winters it may spread to 30 square kilometer. In summer it may in the monsoon it may probably spread to 50 square kilometer, but they are still wetlands. But when we will call it flood, I think that things needs to be ascertained based on science. And I think the ground people working day and night in Kaziranga can really help the scientific investigations by providing the true information, so that a decision based on science can be taken. I'm sure government has taken the decisions to construct more highlands inside the national park with a very good intention. But that good intention has to be supported with scientific inputs, so that we don't take any wrong decisions. We cannot afford to take any wrong decisions. Whatever decisions we take, we have to take right decisions, and science can play an important role.
It seems like they're making a quick decision every time that the floods reach a certain level, as you said, a high level. And I think you're right. Maybe we need to take a step back, think about this issue, study it, engage more people that can approach it from different angles, and as you said, study it scientifically. So how can people get involved to maybe help this project come to a successful fruition?
Well, I think like the hydrologists can definitely help us with regards to better understanding of the hydrology, inflow and outflow of water. A habitat specialist can really help us how we can still maintain grassland, especially the wet grassland. The tall grasslands looks good, but most of them are unpalatable. It's the sprouting grasses that gives the main food or fodder to the rhinos. So we need to ensure that the sprouting grasses needs a specific habitats interspersed with wetlands. So that kind of inputs are essential. So a multidisciplinary team of experts can really help the government to take the good decisions, and that will ensure the future of rhinos probably for another 100 of years, so that we can see rhinos in the floodplains. And flood, of course, as the developmental pressures are going on, more and more dams are being constructed, not only in our countries, but also in the upstream countries. So we also need to look at how we are going to cope with the release of, huge volume of, water, and accordingly we need to plan. Uh, Generally, as I said, a lot of people are emotional, and people needs to be emotional. There is no wrong about that. But certain decisions, I think, needs to come from the brain rather than from the emotions. Okay, so a culminations of the emotions and a good scientific analysis using our brain will definitely ensure the conservation success of rhinos, because the Assamese people are very much affectionate towards rhinos. All of us, we feel very proud to have rhinos. Even a single rhino dies, we feel very bad.
That is very good advice, and yes, you're absolutely right. The passion for rhinos in Assam is amazing, and you know that these ideas are coming from a place of wanting to help wildlife, which is great. So, channeling that passion and is as you suggested is a wonderful idea, and I hope the government can convene that type of group that would study the park and everything else that's going around that's impacting the park, and work with other countries as well. That's would be a wonderful project to undertake, and very good for all the wildlife, particularly the rhinos. You mentioned in that passion, as the rhinos, the fact that the government actually closed a major road to allow wildlife and rhinos to move across that road into the highlands is fact enough. But when they move across that, they do sometimes enter villages, enter settlements, enter areas that humans are in. How can we improve the relationship between people and wildlife?
Well, I think the local peoples have been contributing very positively towards conservation as a whole. And during this flood time also, most of the local people are assisting the national park authorities to rescue the animals, or at least not to disturb the animals during that timing of refuge. I think this, the contributions of the local people needs to be acknowledged, and some, like developmental, project like eco development project, which the forest department are already, engaging some of the villages around the national park. So I think some sort of incentive, some sort of recognitions of their contributions, some sort of recognition about their sacrifice, when animals comes and destroy their crop fields. I think those all things needs to be acknowledged, and it should be internationally acknowledged that these are the villages, around Kaziranga National Parks are something like a very supportive villages. I think sometimes money is not the only solution. Sometimes the recognitions that the people are playing may also play a very important role. So a culminations of economic development. When I talk about economic development, it's not like big industries and give money to the people. It may be organic. Our honorable prime minister has been insisting that Assam should be promoted as an organic hub. Let that organic hub concept start from the villages of Kaziranga National Park, and there are enough potentialities there. I think we really need to look forward, promote organic hub concept, and at the same time, garnering the continued garnering of support from the local communities to conserve and protect our rhinos. I think that will ensure. And of course, our forest staff, our police officials are playing day and night positive roles, and we could see the results in past few years that in rhino poaching could be minimized. But we all know rhino poachers, the international gang of criminals are also not sleeping. At any moment of time, they may again hit back. For that, I think not only the enforcement agencies in Assam, but also I think the local communities and concerned citizens has to be more sensitive and more alert, so that no external forces or internal forces can really hunt down our rhinos. So that's the motto I think we all need to strengthen.
Definitely great ideas there as well. So again, it's Assam is a model for around the world for involvement on every level to protect wildlife, in particular the rhinos that they are so proud of, as they should be. What are the current trends for Greater One Horned-Rhinos?
Okay, current trends, if we see in Assam, definitely, the Kaziranga population or Orang and Pabitra population are increasing. Manas National Park, we had earlier, during 1980s, about 60, 70 rhinos. It was wiped out because of socio-political unrest. But as situation has improved under Indian Rhino Vision 2020, and International Rhino Foundation is part of, this IRB 2020 since the beginning. We could translocate, 20 rhinos from Kaziranga and Pabitra Wildlife Sanctuaries to Manas National Park. There were few rhinos were also, being shifted from the Kaziranga Rescue Center to the Manas National Park. And currently we have 41 rhinos. So from zero at one stage, like in 2005, we have 40. So we have more plan to, under IRB to further boost up the populations there. And I hope that place can also can be self-sustaining in near futures. And there are almost 19 births of rhino cubs in Manas National Park after the bad phase. Since so after 2005 there are 19 births. So overall, I think the situation is very good. Even in West Bengal or even in in the northern India, we have another national park called Dudua National Park. The populations are marginally and slowly increasing. Nepal also, despite the challenges, they also have been able to protect rhinos, at least out of probably last 7 years, almost 6 years, they could achieve no poaching, zero poaching. But there were, of course, some instances of rhinos that increasing naturally. It could be because of anthrax or others. So that's something Nepalese governments are trying to find out. There were at least 5 instances of anthrax death of rhinos in Jaldapara National Park in West Bengal. So there are few threats. Poaching is not the only threats. Sometimes the other threats are also equally important. But we need to detect, we need to treat. And one of the major challenges I personally visualize is the gradual invasion of some plant species in the grassland habitat, because our rhinos, the Greater One HornedRhinos, prefer grasses. So that also needs to be managed. This needs to be managed scientifically so that we can manage a good grassland habitats and give good space to the growing numbers of the rhinos.
Well, we look forward to more efforts from IRV 2020 in the future, and I know that Nepal has had to delay their survey for a year because of COVID-19, and so there've been a lot of obstacles and challenges beyond what the normal challenges are: habitat, invasive species, poaching for rhinos. So thank you to everybody that has stepped up to overcome those obstacles on behalf of a growing rhino population of over more than 3,600 Greater One HornedRhinos. Do you have any last thoughts for us before we go?
Well, I think for all the viewers, my request would be, do think about rhinos, contribute whatever way you could to secure the future of rhinos wherever you are. Please do have your soft corner for rhinos, so that people in the ground who are working day and night very hard, their contributions are also complemented by your token contributions as well. So I look forward for your proactive support.
That is an excellent way to end this talk. Thank you so much, Bibhab, for joining me today, and all your support for rhinos and all of the people working hard in India and Nepal as well. Hey, Team Rhino, Bibhab gave you some actions. Here are a few more that you could take on World Rhino Day and every day. Stay informed, spread the word, wear the shirt, and of course, if you're able, please donate. We always appreciate your donations, or start your own fundraiser. You can find out more at rhinos.org/world-rhino-day. Thank you very much for joining me today. We'll be back with more talks on World Rhino Day and hope you have fun. Thanks. Bye.